Ever heard that saying, failure is just a stepping stone? Well, today's deep dive, we're diving into a company called Bliss.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, they're all about making event planning, like weddings and stuff, easier,
Yeah,
like a one-stop shop for all that planning stress.
I get you.
But the thing is, Bliss, well, they didn't quite make it. They closed down.
Oh, it's a shame. But I bet there's some lessons in there, right?
Exactly. That's what we're talking about today. What can women entrepreneurs, like our listeners, learn from Bliss, even though, they didn't hit it big?
Yeah, sometimes those stories are even more insightful.
Totally. So first up, finding your niche. Bliss, they were great at that.
Right, because the market was already packed with event planners.
Yeah, so how'd they stand out?
Well, they went for a niche that others were kind of, I guess, overlooking.
Yeah.
Busy professionals who wanted a really premium experience, but without, lifting a finger. Like a hands-off fairy godmother for event planning.
Okay, I love that. So listeners, think about it. What's your niche? What makes you different?
Exactly. What's that special sauce?
And on top of that, Bliss really nailed the whole user experience thing.
Yeah. In today's world, if your platform is a pain to use, forget it. People will jump ship so fast.
It's like, who has time for that? No one.
Exactly. And the article we're looking at today, it talks about how Bliss tackled those dreaded budget spreadsheets. Like everyone hates those, right?
The worst.
They made it simple, intuitive templates, easy to use tools, you know, took the guesswork out of managing money.
Because let's be real, that's the part that trips people up.
So smart.
Huge pain point. So yeah, the takeaway, make your product, whatever it is, a joy to use, easy, intuitive.
Like a warm hug.
Exactly. Now, another thing Bliss did really well was partnerships.
Oh, yeah. Teamwork makes the dream work.
They teamed up with everyone, photographers, caterers, florists, you name it, they had a partnership.
And it was strategic. Instantly boosted their credibility. People see you working with the best and they think, okay, these guys are legit.
It took an instant endorsement.
Exactly. Plus, it expands your reach overnight. Those partners, they already have their own clients, right? Built-in marketing.
Genius.
And here's the kicker. It gave them access to all sorts of experts. They didn't have to know everything about event planning because their partners did.
So smart, leveraging the power of other people's expertise. It's a great lesson. You don't have to be a one-person show. Collaborate. Look around. Who can you team up with to do amazing things? But, of course, no entrepreneurial journey is like perfectly smooth sailing, right? There are always bumps in the road.
Oh, absolutely. It's those bumps, those detours that often teach us the most valuable lessons, I think.
Totally. And Bliss's story, it's got a few of those bumps.
It does, yeah.
So, get ready because we're going to dig into some of the mistakes, the missteps, those moments where you're like, if only I had a time machine.
Right. But hey, those mistakes, they're actually golden nuggets of wisdom because once you learn from them, you save yourself so much time, money, and probably some stress down the line.
Totally. It's like learn from their missteps so you don't have to make them yourself.
Exactly. Learn from the best and, learn from the rest, as they say.
Okay, so let's dive into maybe the scariest part for a lot of entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
the whole financial side of things.
Right. And unfortunately, this was a big one for Bliss. It was one of the things that led to them closing down.
Yeah, it's that thing where I think a lot of creative people, especially, we get so caught up in the passion, the ideas, that sometimes the whole numbers thing
It's easy to let it slide, yeah.
feels kind of scary.
Yeah, it can be intimidating. But here's the thing. You can have the most amazing product in the world, the coolest brand, but
If the numbers aren't working.
if your foundation's shaky, it's all going to come crashing down, It's like building a house on sand.
Oh, that's a scary image.
Right. So it's crucial to really understand your cash flow, your revenue, like all of it, and have a solid financial plan from the get-go.
Okay, so for anyone listening who, just broke into a sweat when you started talking numbers, what's your advice? Where do they even start?
Honestly, don't be afraid to ask for help. There are so many resources out there. Find a financial advisor who gets you, who speaks your language, or even take an online course. There are tons specifically for entrepreneurs.
Yeah, because knowledge is power when it comes to this stuff. All right, so moving on. Let's talk about marketing. So Bliss, they had this great product, easy to use, but they kind of struggled to get the word out in a big way.
Right. It's that whole build it and they will come thing. Doesn't always work like that in the real world, unfortunately.
Right. It's like you bake this amazing cake, but then you forget to tell anyone about the party.
Exactly. You can have the best things in sliced bread, but if no one knows about it, it's like a tree falling in the forest. Did it even happen?
Ouch. That's rough. Okay, so how do you avoid that? How do you make sure people hear you?
Well, it's about really understanding who your ideal customer is, right?
Yeah.
Where do they hang out online? What are they reading? And then it's about tailoring your message to them, speaking their language. It's not just about shouting into the void, it's about having a conversation.
It's like targeted conversations instead of just like yelling randomly.
Yes. And don't be afraid to experiment. Try different things, see what sticks, what resonates with your people.
Okay, now let's talk about another biggie. Keeping those customers coming back for more. Customer retention, right?
Right. And this was another hurdle for Bliss. They were great at attracting new customers, but holding on to them long term, that was tricky.
Yeah, it's like that whole "it's not you, it's me" breakup line. But in this case, it kind of was them.
Well, to be fair, they bumped up against something a lot of businesses offering a one-time service struggle with. How do you turn that one-time thing into a lasting relationship, right?
Okay, so how do you do that? How do you avoid becoming a one-hit wonder and create a loyal following that sticks around?
Well, that's where you got to get strategic. Think, what else can I offer that complements my main thing? Maybe it's a subscription, a loyalty program, or even just really valuable content that keeps people engaged even when they're not actively buying from you. Build a whole world around your brand.
So it's about creating a community, a place where people want to be.
Exactly. Now, I think it's worth taking a closer look at some of the bigger picture challenges that Bliss faced, because these can offer some really interesting insights for anyone starting a business.
Okay, I'm all ears. What do we need to know?
Well, one of the big takeaways from their experience is just how important it is to have a business model that's actually sustainable in the long run. Their idea was cool, they were solving a real problem, but ultimately their revenue streams just weren't strong enough to weather the storms.
So they maybe had the right idea, but the execution needed some work on that front.
Yeah, like they built a beautiful sailboat, but maybe didn't quite account for the fact that sometimes the seas get rough and the wind changes direction. You got to be ready to adjust your sails.
I love that analogy. Okay, what about those customer retention struggles we were talking about?
Yeah, so when we look at why Bliss had a hard time getting people to stick around, it actually reveals some really fascinating stuff that applies to pretty much any business, no matter what you're selling.
Okay, spill the tea. What do they miss?
So one thing that stands out is that while they were amazing at the logistics, the practical side of event planning, they didn't quite nail the emotional aspect.
Interesting. So it wasn't just about like checking things off the to-do list.
Exactly. Especially for something like a wedding or really any big event, it's about more than just logistics, right? It's about memories, creating an experience. It's emotional.
So yeah, like getting the flowers delivered on time is important, but it's got to be more than that.
Right. And I think that's a really powerful lesson for any business. How can
Mhm.
you infuse your work, your product, whatever it is, with that heart, that connection? How do you go from a purely transactional relationship to something deeper?
Ooh, that's good. Food for thought right there. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Successes, those bumps in the road, the big picture stuff. It's like we went scuba diving in the entrepreneurial ocean and came back up with a whole treasure chest full of wisdom.
And that's the whole point, right? To
Yeah.
learn from each other's journeys. It's not about praising the wins or pointing fingers at the losses. It's about understanding why things happened the way they did and then using that knowledge to make smarter decisions.
Love it.
Mhm.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive, I got to ask you one last kind of big question. Inspired by Bliss's experience, how can our listeners balance innovation with sustainability in their ventures? It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of a new idea, but how do we make sure it's built to last?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's like you're constantly trying to find that balance between those two things.
Right, because you don't want to lose that creative spark.
Exactly. But you also got to be realistic. It's like you don't want to build a business on a foundation of like cotton candy.
Ooh, that's a
Ah.
visual.
Right.
Looks pretty, but it'll dissolve in like 5 seconds if things get tough. So I always say innovation without sustainability is kind of like a fireworks show.
Okay. I like where you're going with this.
It's dazzling. It's exciting. But it's over in a flash. And then what? You're left with smoke and silence. So how do we make it last?
Right. So how do we create something that's both groundbreaking but also built to last?
Well, it takes work. You got to be asking yourself some tough questions like, is this model actually viable long term? Am I solving a real problem that people actually care about? Or am I just chasing the latest trend.
Right, because trends come and go.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you don't want to be caught up in something that's going to fade away. You got to be thinking about the future.
So it's kind of like having the guts to be bold, to try new things.
Totally. You got to be willing to experiment.
But also having that wisdom to make sure your foundation is solid.
Exactly. And that's what I love about deep dives like this. We get to look at the journeys of others, learn from their wins, learn from their bumps in the road. Totally. Because at the end of the day, no one has all the answers.
Yeah.
We're all just figuring it out as we go.
Exactly. And that's okay. It's about being open to learning, to adapting, and most importantly, supporting each other along the way.
Yes, to all of that.
Yeah.
So to everyone out there listening, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of entrepreneurship. Remember, you got this.
Yeah.
And we'll be back next time with another episode, another story, and a whole bunch more insights to help you rock your business.
See you next time.